Ever wish you could just like update a spreadsheet with your voice? You know, like when you're on the go and you're trying to like wrangle data into those tiny cells on your phone, ever think there has to be a better way?
Oh, totally. It's like the opposite of a seamless workflow.
It's exactly the frustration that sparked this whole idea for voice sheets. And today, we're taking a deep dive into those like very first days of the startup that tried to make this whole voice spreadsheet thing a reality.
And not the polished version you get later on with the press releases and the fancy presentations. We're talking raw meeting notes, research, test results. Like, imagine getting a glimpse into the minds of the founders as they're figuring it all out.
Yeah, exactly. Summer and fall of 2024. So this is like real-time development, complete with all the wrong turns and breakthroughs. It's messy.
Way more interesting than reading a textbook, that's for sure.
Exactly. So you're going to see how they go from this like vague idea to something they can actually test.
And honestly, that's like a journey worth paying attention to no matter what kind of business you're in.
Okay, so let's meet the brains behind NTFC. That was the name of the company itself.
Catchy.
The voices you'll be hearing in these notes, those belong to Justin and Edison.
Okay.
And immediately we see that classic startup dynamic, right?
Yeah.
You've got Justin who's like asking those big picture questions. What problem are we really solving? Is this even a real problem? Will people actually pay for this? Then you've got Edison, knee deep in the tech, obsessed with finding the perfect AI models to make it all work.
It's that tension,
Yeah,
the dreamer and the builder, crucial in those early stages.
absolutely. And their initial like problem statement they came up with, surprisingly relatable, even if you're not, a tech whiz. They start with this: ergonomic computing on the go is clunky.
Which, right away, tells us they're thinking about a specific kind of user. They're picturing someone who's working remotely, constantly on the move. Someone who feels weighed down by their devices, by all their gear.
It's funny, they even talk about the weight of their laptops, the awkwardness of like trying to set up your whole workstation in a cafe, limitations of existing tools. They even tried those like foldable ergonomic keyboards.
Right, right. Like trying to make it work with what's already out there. It's like they're experiencing these pain points themselves.
Yeah.
And that's often where the best ideas come from.
Yeah.
Scratching your own itch.
And then Edison has this aha moment. He's like using Google Suite on his phone sheets specifically, and it hits him, just how clunky the whole experience is.
I know, we've all been there, trying to do anything remotely complex on those tiny little screens.
Exactly. And that sparks something. Like, what if you could just bypass that whole clunky interface and just use your voice?
Tedious, right?
And so their first brainchild is born. A Costella, that's what they called it, this early version. And they go down this rabbit hole of testing like every AI model under the sun.
Which is, it's not as simple as it sounds.
Mm.
Because you're not just looking for something that can, like, transcribe words. You're trying to capture the way we actually talk.
All the pauses, the tangents.
Exactly. It's not just about making voice recognition work. It's about teaching the AI to understand intent. What are you actually trying to do?
And then translate that into like clean, usable data in a spreadsheet, which, yeah, not easy at all.
Not easy at all.
Right.
It's probably partly why they ended up scrapping the name Costella
Yeah.
later on. But anyway.
Right. So it's around this time that they get some tough love
Oh, no, what happened?
from Antler, which, for those listening who aren't familiar, it's a startup generator.
Okay.
And these are, people who see promising ideas all the time. They've heard it all. And the feedback they give Justin and Edison is basically, this is cool and all, but like, where's the practical use case? Show us that this is something people are going to, actually use and pay for, and not just like a cool tech demo.
Oof, yeah. You can practically hear the doubt creeping into their notes after that meeting. That's a good reminder, though, that even the most brilliant minds, they need that outside validation.
That reality check to make sure they're not just, building something in a vacuum.
Exactly.
So they start this kind of frantic search for their why. Like, what is the killer app for voice-controlled spreadsheets? What problem can they solve that no one else has solved before?
Because that's the million-dollar question, right? It's not enough to have cool technology. You need a reason for people to care.
Okay, so they're brainstorming, right? And they start testing out different applications, almost like throwing spaghetti at the wall just to see what sticks. Justin, he dives right in, starts using it as this like trading journal, trying to capture those, split-second decisions you make when you're trading stocks. and more importantly, the why behind them.
Which is super interesting when you think about it.
Right.
Because how often do you, like, have a flash of insight and then totally forget it later?
All the time.
This is a way to capture those aha moments.
Yeah.
They're basically vocalizing your thought process in real time.
And then you've got Edison taking a completely different approach. He's using it as a mood tracker.
Okay.
But here's where it gets really cool. He starts connecting that mood data to external sources.
Like what?
We're talking his calendar, the weather. I think he was even messing around with sleep data. Like,
Yeah.
he's trying to map out how external factors influence his internal state.
Very quantified self,
Yeah,
but also very ambitious for a product that's barely even a prototype at this point.
totally. And you can see, like, their vision's starting to expand. They're not just talking about, data entry anymore. They're talking about a system that understands context, that can connect those dots between what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and what's happening around you.
Okay, yeah, that's big.
Then there's this whole thing where they're trying to turn Costella into, like, a brainstorming tool.
A brainstorming tool.
They're playing around with AI prompts, right? Prompts that ask you follow-up questions, try to spark new ideas and connections.
So instead of just you and the blank page, you've got this AI nudge helping you dig deeper. I kind of like that.
It's like having a thought partner built into your spreadsheet software.
Okay, that's a good way to put it.
All right, buckle up, because now we're getting into those wait what moments that make you appreciate just how messy, early stage development can be.
And how many ideas end up on the cutting room floor?
Exhibit A. There's this whole section of notes dedicated to a mind mapping feature that never actually, saw the light of day.
A mind mapping feature, huh? So they were really going for it.
Oh, yeah, and get this. It was supposed to connect to those X-Real glasses.
The augmented reality ones.
Those are the ones. Imagine, building a mind map with your voice, and you're seeing those branches and connections, appearing in your field of vision as you speak.
Okay, yeah, that's next level.
Definitely ahead of its time. Then there's Edison and his fascination with ambient computing. He keeps mentioning.
Ambient computing, like it always on in the background kind of thing.
Exactly. He's obsessed with this idea of capturing ideas seamlessly on the go without having to, pull out your phone or open your laptop.
So technology just fades into the background until you need it. It's a cool idea, but is it even possible?
And don't even get me started on the data sources. Remember how we were talking about them trying to connect Costella to everything?
Yeah.
Stock prices, news feeds, weather reports, location data. I mean, they wanted it all.
And you can see why. If you're going to create this super powered spreadsheet, why not connect it to the real world?
But their notes reveal that classic, startup struggle ambition exceeding what the tech can actually do, APIs that won't play nice, data that's a mess to access, that kind of thing.
It's easy to forget that even with all the AI advancements, there's still limitations,
It's not magic.
Not yet, anyway.
And of course, we can't talk about voice-based anything without mentioning the L word. The bane of all real-time applications. How do you make this whole process, the recording, the transcribing, analyzing, updating a spreadsheet, how do you make it all happen instantaneously?
You've got milliseconds to play with before it starts to feel clunky.
Exactly. And their notes are full of these, attempts to optimize every step, but they're also realistic about the fact that at a certain point you hit the limits of what's currently possible.
Which is another good reminder for anyone building in this space.
Mhm.
It's not just about having the smartest AI. It's about the user experience.
If it's laggy or clunky, no one's going to use it, no matter how cool the features are.
Exactly.
And speaking of, they're spending a ton of time fine-tuning those AI models.
Which, just for folks who might not be familiar, those models are like the brains of the operation. But then you've got the prompts too, which are like dot instructions.
Telling the AI what to do with the information it's getting.
Exactly. And Edison, he's laser focused on this.
Yeah.
Trying to find that sweet spot between complexity and, something that your average person can actually use and understand.
And they're not just sticking to one AI provider either. They're testing models from OpenAI, Anthropic, even Perplexity, which I thought was interesting.
Why is that?
Well, Perplexity is known for, being able to search the internet and cite sources.
I see what you mean.
So it's like they're thinking beyond just, hey, let me dictate this into a spreadsheet. They want Costella to be this research assistant, pulling in information from the real world and adding to your spreadsheet.
Okay, that makes sense. They weren't thinking small.
Not at all. And, all this makes you wonder, how do you even begin to design a user interface for something this complex?
Right. If you've got all this power under the hood, how do you make it user-friendly.
That's the million-dollar question. And to their credit, they were very aware that they couldn't just like design this in a vacuum
They needed real people to actually test this thing out.
and give them brutal feedback. And what's fascinating is who they target for this early feedback. They're not looking for just anyone. They want people who already get spreadsheets.
So they're not trying to convince people of the value of spreadsheets in the first place.
Exactly. They want people who understand that and can then tell them, okay, does this actually make my life easier? Does it add to the experience or just make it more complicated?
Smart.
And, the way they pitch it is interesting too. It's not just about speed or efficiency. There's this one note from Justin where he says something like, we need to own ramble understanding, like capturing those half-formed thoughts, the ideas that wouldn't normally make it into a spreadsheet.
Because so much of how our brains work is messy, right? We
Yeah.
jump around, we circle back, and a lot of traditional software, it forces you to be linear.
He wanted to make technology more human.
I like that.
And they're clearly using Costella itself to track all this.
Very meta.
There's a detailed evaluation sheet for like how the different prompts are performing, different AI models. They're capturing and analyzing their own feedback using the product itself.
That's commitment right there.
And this one detail, I don't know, it really jumped out at me. There's this note from Edison, and he's talking about the mood tracking stuff, right? And he says, I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically says, my intonation, the way my voice sounds, it might reveal things about how I'm actually feeling, things that I'm not even aware of consciously. Like, he sees this potential for voice to not just, record information, but to deepen our self-awareness.
Whoa. That's a whole other level of thinking.
It's like, yeah, therapy via spreadsheet.
Maybe. But it does make you wonder what else they were trying to, pull out of those voice recordings.
Right. Like, what hidden signals are we giving off without even realizing it?
Well, this is where it gets even more interesting.
Yeah.
Remember how we were talking about Edison trying to connect Costella
Yeah.
to, like, everything under the sun?
Stock prices, the weather reports.
Yeah, all that. It turns out he wasn't just fixated on stock prices. He was also playing around with location data.
Location data. Wait, like where you physically are when you're recording a voice memo?
Exactly. So he's got this idea. I don't know if you can even call it an idea at this point. It's more like a what if. But he's thinking about adding geographical context to thoughts and ideas.
So, like, imagine being able to analyze your brainstorming sessions, but you're also seeing, like, where you were when certain ideas popped up.
Exactly.
I mean, on the one hand, it's like, oh, interesting. All my million-dollar ideas happen on Tuesdays after a double espresso. But also, like, that's getting into some pretty sensitive data.
Yeah, for sure. Raises some privacy concerns. But for Edison, it seems more about, like, unlocking hidden patterns, seeing if location adds another layer of self-understanding.
He was definitely full of those, like, what-if questions, like that mind mapping thing we talked about.
Yeah.
I'm still amazed by that one. Which makes me wonder, out of all the stuff they were experimenting with, what actually gained some traction?
Well, there's this one theme that keeps popping up in Edison's notes. He keeps mentioning this thing called semantic memory.
Semantic memory. Okay. That sounds like something I should know, but don't.
It's basically how our brains, store and organize general knowledge. Facts, concepts, meanings. Like the building blocks of understanding.
Okay, but how does that relate to, like, building a voice-controlled spreadsheet?
Think about how we use search engines now, right? We type in keywords and hope for the best.
Yeah, cross your fingers and hope it understands what you meant.
Exactly. But what if you could search based on meaning, not exact wording?
So instead of, like, Googling best coffee shops near me, I could just be like, ugh, I need a caffeine fix stat. Where should I go?
Exactly. And the system understands your intent, even if you phrase it differently every single time.
Okay, now we're talking.
And this is what Edison was so convinced of. He really believed that semantic memory was the key to unlocking the true potential of voice interfaces.
So not just giving commands, but actually having a back and forth.
A real conversation.
He even started testing prompts, where the AI is almost acting like a cognitive psychologist, like guiding the user toward what they need, even if they can't articulate it directly.
It's a different way of thinking about it. Less about commands and more about discovery.
So less open spreadsheet, more let's explore what's in your brain.
Exactly. And it's what makes these early notes so fascinating to me. It's like, we're not just uncovering the origin story of a product. We're seeing a glimpse of this potential future where technology understands us on a much deeper level than it does now.
Which brings us back to the big question, right? Did Justin and Edison crack the code? Did they figure out a way to make semantic memory work for them?
Well, these notes only give us a snapshot in time. They don't tell us the whole story. Did NTFC succeed? Did they get the funding they needed?
Those are stories for another deep dive, maybe.
Exactly. But, even if we don't have all the answers, these notes, they remind us that some of the most exciting innovations, they start with a very simple question. What if?
What if we could talk to our spreadsheets like they were actual assistants? What if technology could understand us, like truly understand us?
And that's something worth thinking about, no matter what kind of problem you're trying to solve.
So, the next time you bump up against the limitations of technology, which I'm guessing is like 5 times a day, remember Justin and Edison.
Keep that curiosity alive.
You never know what amazing, crazy, brilliant thing you might discover along the way.
And on that note, keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.